The hospital clock on the wall showed 11:45 p.m. when Lisa finally took off her scrubs. Her feet ached from standing for 12 straight hours, and her back felt like someone had been hitting it with a hammer. The emergency room had been crazy busy that night. 3 car accidents, 2 heart attacks, and a kitchen fire that brought in a family of 4 with smoke poisoning. She sat down on the bench in the locker room and rubbed her temples. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, making that annoying sound they always made late at night when the building got quiet. Most of the day shift nurses had gone home hours ago. Now it was just her, a few night shift workers, and the security guard who always nodded at her when she walked past his desk. Lisa grabbed her purse from her locker and checked her phone. No messages. Her roommate was probably already asleep, which meant the apartment would be dark and quiet when she got home. That sounded perfect right now. All she wanted was to take a hot shower, make some tea, and maybe watch something mindless on TV until she fell asleep. She walked through the empty hallways of the hospital. Her sneakers squeaked against the polished floors. The place felt different at night. During the day, it was full of visitors, doctors rushing around, and the constant noise of people coming and going. But after midnight, it became this strange, quiet place where only the most serious stuff happened. The automatic doors slid open as she approached the main entrance. The night air hit her face, cool and fresh after breathing recycled hospital air for so long. She pulled her jacket tighter around her shoulders and looked out at the parking lot. That's when she remembered the worst part of her day. Her car was sitting in some repair shop across town with a busted transmission. The mechanic had called her during her lunch break to tell her it would cost $800 to fix. $800 she didn't have right now. Her credit card was already maxed out from last month's rent and groceries. So here she was, stuck walking home at almost midnight because she couldn't afford a taxi either. The walk wasn't too bad during the day. It was only about 8 blocks from the hospital to her apartment building. She had done it plenty of times when the weather was nice or when she wanted some exercise. But walking alone at night was different. The streets looked darker, the shadows seemed longer, and every little sound made her jump. She pulled out her phone and thought about calling her roommate to come pick her up. But Jenny had to be up early for work, and she was probably already asleep. Lisa didn't want to wake her up just because she was being paranoid about walking home. She was a grown woman. She could handle 8 blocks. The first few blocks weren't too bad. She stayed on the main street where there were still some cars driving by, and a few businesses with their lights on. A late-night pizza place, a gas station, and a small grocery store that stayed open until 1 a.m. She waved at the guy behind the counter at the gas station who was reading a magazine. He looked up and waved back, but as she got further from the hospital, the streets got quieter. The street lights seemed dimmer, and there were more dark spaces between them. Some of the bulbs were burned out, creating these long stretches where she could barely see where she was walking. She found herself walking faster without really thinking about it. Her apartment building was in an older part of town where the houses were built close together, and the trees grew tall enough to block out most of the streetlights. During the day, it was actually pretty nice. The neighborhood had character, as her landlord liked to say. Old brick buildings, tree-lined streets, and front porches where people actually sat and talked to their neighbors. At night, though, all that character turned into hiding spots and dark corners. The big oak trees that provided nice shade during hot summer days now created these black spaces where anyone could be standing. The narrow alleys between buildings looked like perfect places for someone to jump out at you. Lisa checked her phone again. 11:52 p.m. She was making good time. If she kept walking at this pace, she would be home in about 15 minutes. Then she could lock her door, turn on all the lights, and forget about being nervous. She thought about the patients she had helped that night. There was an elderly man who came in with chest pains that turned out to be just anxiety. His wife had been so worried, holding his hand and asking the doctors the same questions over and over again. Lisa had sat with them for a while, explaining what the tests meant and helping them understand that he was going to be okay. Then there was the young mother who brought in her baby with a high fever. The woman was barely 20 years old and completely panicked. She kept apologizing for coming to the emergency room, saying she didn't know if it was serious enough. Lisa had to keep telling her that she did exactly the right thing by bringing the baby in. Better safe than sorry, especially with little ones. These were the moments that made her job worth it. Not the paperwork or the long hours or the sore feet. It was being there when people needed help the most. being the calm voice when everything else felt scary and out of control. A car drove by, its headlights sweeping across the sidewalk in front of her. For a second, the bright light made her squint and look away. When her eyes adjusted back to the darkness, she realized she had reached the quiet part of her walk. The part where there were no more businesses, just residential streets and empty lots. This was always the hardest part. The next 4 blocks were the darkest and most isolated. No late-night stores, no traffic, just her footsteps echoing off the empty sidewalk. She pulled her phone out again and held it in her hand, ready to call 911 if she needed to. The screen cast a small circle of blue light around her fingers. She could see her apartment building in the distance, just barely visible under a streetlight about 6 blocks away. It looked warm and safe and exactly where she wanted to be. She picked up her pace a little more, her sneakers making soft slapping sounds against the concrete. Behind her, she heard something that made her stomach clench. Footsteps. Not her footsteps, but someone else's, matching her pace and getting closer. Lisa's heart started beating faster. She tried to tell herself it was nothing. Maybe someone else was just walking home from work too. Maybe it was someone walking their dog or going to the corner store. But the footsteps behind her seemed to speed up when she sped up and slow down when she slowed down. She gripped her phone tighter and thought about calling someone. Anyone. But who would she call at midnight? And what would she say? That she heard footsteps behind her? That probably sounded crazy. This was a normal neighborhood where normal people lived. She was just being paranoid because she was tired and stressed about her car. The footsteps got closer. Lisa could hear them more clearly now. Heavy shoes, probably boots, hitting the sidewalk in a steady rhythm. She wanted to turn around and look, but something told her not to. Some instinct that said looking back might make things worse. Instead, she picked up her pace again. Her sneakers were quiet against the pavement. But whoever was behind her wasn't trying to be quiet at all. The footsteps echoed off the empty houses on both sides of the street. Most of the windows were dark. Everyone was asleep in their beds, safe behind locked doors. Lisa reached into her purse and felt around for her keys. If she needed to run, she wanted to be ready to unlock her apartment door as fast as possible. Her fingers found the familiar shape of her keyring, and she pulled it out, holding it between her fingers like her self-defense class had taught her years ago. She was 3 blocks from home now, 3 blocks that suddenly felt like 3 miles. The streetlights here were even more spread out, creating long, dark spaces between pools of yellow light. She stayed as close to the lights as possible, but that meant walking right down the middle of the sidewalk where she felt completely exposed. The footsteps were getting closer, close enough that she could hear them clearly even over the sound of her own breathing, which was getting heavier as she walked faster. Her mouth felt dry and her palms were starting to sweat despite the cool night air. She passed a house with a porch light on and felt a tiny bit better. At least someone in that house might be awake. If she screamed, maybe they would hear her and call the police. But she also knew that most people didn't want to get involved in other people's problems, especially at midnight, 2 blocks from home. She could see her apartment building more clearly now. The light in the lobby was on, and she could make out the familiar shape of the front steps. She had climbed those steps hundreds of times. Soon she would be climbing them again, and then she would be safe inside with the door locked behind her. But the footsteps behind her were getting even closer. Close enough that she started to panic. This wasn't her imagination anymore. Someone was definitely following her and they were catching up. She thought about running, but she wasn't sure her tired legs could carry her 2 full blocks at a sprint. Then she heard something that made her blood freeze. A second set of footsteps. 2 people were behind her now, and they were both getting closer. Her self-defense instructor's voice echoed in her head. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Lisa made a decision. She was going to turn around and see who was following her. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was just 2 people who happened to be walking in the same direction. But she needed to know what she was dealing with. She took a deep breath and started to turn her head. That's when she felt a hand grab her arm. The touch was firm but not painful. Strong fingers wrapped around her elbow, just above where her jacket ended. Lisa opened her mouth to scream. But before any sound came out, she heard a man's voice very close to her ear. Walk faster, he said quietly. His voice was calm but urgent, like he was trying not to scare her but also trying to get her attention. Don't look back. Just walk faster. Lisa's mind went blank for a second. This wasn't what she had expected. The man holding her arm wasn't threatening her or demanding her purse. He wasn't trying to drag her into an alley or force her to go somewhere she didn't want to go. He was telling her to walk faster, which was exactly what she wanted to do anyway. But he was still a stranger who had grabbed her in the dark, and every part of her brain was screaming that this was dangerous. She tried to pull her arm away, but his grip tightened slightly. "Please," he said, and now she could hear something in his voice that sounded almost like fear. "I'm not going to hurt you, but you need to listen to me right now. There are 2 men behind us, and they've been following you since you left the hospital." Lisa felt like the ground had dropped out from under her. Following her since the hospital? She had been walking for almost 20 minutes. If someone had been following her that whole time, why hadn't she noticed? How had this stranger noticed when she hadn't? The man started walking faster, still holding her arm, and Lisa found herself matching his pace. She wanted to look behind them to see these 2 men he was talking about, but he had told her not to look back. Part of her brain was still convinced that this was all some kind of trick, that this man was the real danger and he was just trying to confuse her. But another part of her brain, the part that had kept her alive through 12 years of working in emergency rooms, was telling her to pay attention to the details. The man's voice sounded genuinely worried. His grip on her arm was protective, not threatening. And most importantly, he wasn't trying to take her anywhere she didn't want to go. He was helping her get home faster. "Who are you?" she whispered as they walked quickly down the dark street. "My name is David," he said. "I work security at the office building 2 blocks from the hospital. I saw those 2 guys start following you when you left work, and I've been trying to catch up to you ever since." Lisa's apartment building was just 1 block away now. She could see the numbers on the front door clearly under the porch light. Almost there. Almost safe. But she could also hear those other footsteps behind them, the ones that belonged to the 2 men David was talking about. "What do they want?" she asked, though she was afraid she already knew the answer. David glanced back quickly, then looked forward again. "Nothing good," he said. "We need to get you somewhere public. Somewhere with lights and other people." Lisa realized that her apartment building, which had seemed like safety just a few minutes ago, might not be safe at all. If these men were really following her with bad intentions, walking up to her front door would just tell them where she lived. And the lobby of her building was empty at this time of night. "There's a diner," she said, remembering the 24-hour restaurant on the main street. "About 3 blocks in the other direction." "Perfect," David said. "Can you run?" Lisa nodded, even though running was the last thing her tired legs wanted to do. But the fear pumping through her body gave her energy she didn't know she had. David let go of her arm, and they both started jogging toward the main street where the diner was located. As they moved faster, Lisa could hear the footsteps behind them pick up pace too. The sound echoed off the empty houses, creating this awful rhythm that seemed to follow them no matter how quickly they moved. She wanted to look back so badly, but David had told her not to, and something about his voice made her trust him. "How do you know they were following me from the hospital?" she asked between breaths as they jogged. "I was doing my rounds," David explained, breathing a little heavily but not as much as she was. "I checked the parking lots and the streets around our building every hour. Part of my job. I saw you leave the hospital, and I noticed these 2 guys who had been hanging around the parking lot suddenly start walking in the same direction. They turned the corner onto Pine Street, still 2 blocks from the diner. Lisa's sneakers slapped against the pavement, and she could feel her purse bouncing against her hip with each step. Her chest was starting to burn from running, but she kept going. At first I thought maybe it was nothing," David continued. "People walk the same direction all the time, but then I noticed they were staying about half a block behind you, matching your speed exactly. When you slowed down, they slowed down. When you sped up, they did too." Lisa felt sick to her stomach. She had been so focused on getting home safely that she hadn't even noticed she was being hunted. The thought of those 2 men watching her, planning something terrible, made her feel violated and angry at the same time. "Why didn't you call the police?" she asked. "I did," David said. "But you know how it is. They said they couldn't do anything unless a crime was actually being committed. Following someone on a public street isn't illegal, even if it feels wrong." They were getting closer to the main street now. Lisa could see the glow of streetlights and neon signs ahead of them. The diner's bright red sign was visible in the distance like a lighthouse guiding them to safety. "Just 1 more block. So you decided to follow us yourself?" Lisa asked. "I couldn't just stand there and watch," David said. My sister was attacked walking home from work about 6 months ago. Different neighborhood, but the same kind of thing. 2 guys followed her for blocks before they grabbed her purse and knocked her down. Lisa felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. Is she okay? She's fine now, but it took her months to feel safe walking alone again. When I saw those guys following you, I couldn't just let it happen to someone else. They reached the main street and suddenly everything felt different. There were cars driving by, even at this late hour. Streetlights every block instead of every 3 blocks. And best of all, the diner was right there, glowing like a warm yellow beacon with its windows full of light and the promise of other people inside. But as they slowed down near the diner's entrance, David grabbed her arm again, more gently this time. Don't look obvious about it, he said quietly, but glance back toward the corner we just came from. Lisa pretended to adjust her purse strap and let her eyes drift back toward Pine Street. What she saw made her heart jump into her throat. 2 figures were standing at the corner under a streetlight about a block away. They weren't moving forward anymore, but they were definitely watching the diner. They stopped following us, she whispered. Because we're somewhere public now, David explained. They don't want witnesses, but they're probably waiting to see what we do next. Lisa got her first good look at David under the diner's bright lights. He was probably in his 30s, with short brown hair and the kind of build that suggested he worked out regularly. He was wearing a dark blue security uniform with a badge on his chest and a radio clipped to his shoulder. Everything about him looked professional and trustworthy. I'm sorry I scared you, he said, noticing her looking at him. I know grabbing a stranger in the dark isn't exactly the best way to introduce yourself, but I didn't have time to explain the whole situation. No, I'm glad you did, Lisa said, and she meant it. I was so focused on getting home that I didn't even notice them. I could have walked right into my apartment building and they would have known exactly where I lived. The thought of that made her shudder. Her apartment had always felt like her safe space, her refuge from the world. The idea that 2 dangerous strangers might have followed her right to her front door felt like a violation of the most personal kind. Let's go inside, David suggested. We can call the police from in there, and you'll be safe while we wait for them. The diner was one of those classic 24-hour places that looked like it hadn't changed since the 1950s. Red vinyl booths, black and white checkered floors, and the smell of coffee and fried food that seemed permanently baked into the walls. There were only a few customers at this hour. A truck driver eating pie at the counter, an elderly man reading a newspaper in a corner booth, and a young couple sharing a plate of fries. The waitress behind the counter looked up when they walked in. She was probably in her 50s, with gray hair pulled back in a ponytail and the kind of no-nonsense expression that suggested she'd seen everything at least twice. You folks okay? She asked, apparently noticing something in their faces that suggested they weren't just regular late-night customers looking for coffee and pie. We need to call the police, David said. This lady was being followed by 2 men. The waitress's expression immediately became more serious. You can use the phone behind the counter, she said, and sit anywhere you want. Coffee's fresh. Lisa slumped into a booth near the front window where she could see the street but felt protected by the bright lights and other people. David slid in across from her and pulled out his cell phone. I'm going to call 911, he said. They'll take this more seriously now that we can describe what happened. As David made the call, Lisa found herself really looking at him for the first time. He had kind eyes and a gentle way of speaking that made her feel calmer. When he talked to the 911 dispatcher, he was clear and detailed, giving their exact location and describing the 2 men as professionally as if he was filing a police report. They're sending a patrol car, he said when he hung up. Should be here in about 10 minutes. The waitress brought them coffee without being asked, and Lisa wrapped her hands around the warm mug, grateful for something to do with her nervous energy. She realized she was shaking slightly, probably from the adrenaline of running, and the shock of discovering she had been in real danger. Yama, she said to David, I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been there. I'm just glad I was in the right place at the right time, he replied, and I'm glad you trusted me enough to listen. The police arrived exactly when they said they would. Lisa saw the patrol car pull up outside the diner, its headlights cutting through the darkness. 2 officers got out, both looking alert and professional despite the late hour. She felt a wave of relief wash over her as they walked through the diner's front door. I'm Officer Rodriguez, said the first one, A woman probably in her 40s with short black hair and sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "This is Officer Chen. We got a call about someone being followed." David stood up and shook hands with both officers. "I'm the one who called. This is Lisa. She works at the hospital and 2 men followed her for almost 20 minutes when she was walking home from her shift." Officer Rodriguez sat down in the booth next to Lisa, while Officer Chen remained standing, occasionally glancing out the window toward the street. Lisa noticed he kept his hand resting casually near his radio, ready to call for backup if needed. "Can you tell me exactly what happened?" Officer Rodriguez asked Lisa, pulling out a small notebook. Lisa started from the beginning, describing how she had left the hospital after her shift and begun walking home because her car was broken. She told them about hearing the footsteps behind her and how scared she had gotten as the sounds got closer. "I thought I was just being paranoid," she admitted. "I work night shifts all the time and I've walked home before. But something felt different tonight." "Trust your instincts," Officer Rodriguez said. "They're usually right." "What happened next?" Lisa looked at David, who nodded encouragingly. "David grabbed my arm and told me to walk faster. At first I thought he was one of the bad guys, but then he explained that he had seen 2 men following me from the hospital." Officer Chen looked at David. "You work security?" "That's right. Midwest Security Solutions. I cover the office building at 5th and Main." David pulled out his wallet and showed them his security badge and ID card. "I was doing my regular patrol rounds when I noticed the situation developing." "And you followed them for how long?" Officer Rodriguez asked. "About 20 minutes. I called dispatch first, but they said they couldn't do anything unless a crime was actually committed. I couldn't just stand there and watch, so I decided to intervene myself." Officer Chen nodded approvingly. "You did the right thing. Can you describe these 2 men?" David thought for a moment. "Both white males, probably in their 20s or early 30s. One was tall, maybe 6 feet, wearing a dark hoodie and jeans. The other was shorter, stockier build, wearing a baseball cap and a brown jacket. They stayed about half a block behind her the whole time, matching her pace exactly. Did you see their faces clearly?" "Not completely, but I got a pretty good look at both of them under the streetlights. The tall one had facial hair, maybe a goatee. The shorter one had a round face and was wearing the baseball cap low over his eyes." Officer Rodriguez wrote everything down in her notebook. "And they followed you all the way to the main street?" "They stopped when we got close to the diner," Lisa said. "David told me not to look back, but I saw them standing at the corner when we got here. They didn't come any closer once we were somewhere public." "Smart," Officer Chen said. "These guys knew what they were doing. They didn't want witnesses?" He looked out the window again. "Are they still out there?" David leaned over to look through the window. "I don't see them anymore. They were at the corner of Pine and Main about 15 minutes ago, but they're gone now." Officer Rodriguez closed her notebook. "We're going to drive around the area and see if we can spot them. In the meantime, I need to tell you something that might be related to your situation." Lisa felt her stomach clench. "What do you mean?" "We've had 3 other incidents in the past month. All women walking alone at night, all in this general area. 2 purse snatchings and 1 attempted assault. The descriptions match what you've told us about these 2 men." The diner suddenly felt colder to Lisa. She wrapped her hands around her coffee mug again, but it had gone lukewarm while they were talking. "You think it's the same guys?" "It's very possible," Officer Chen said. "The pattern fits. They target women walking alone late at night, follow them to isolated areas, then make their move. You're lucky David was there to intervene." Lisa looked at David with new appreciation. She had thought he was just being a good person by helping her, but now she realized he might have saved her from something much worse than just being scared. "What happens now?" she asked. "We're going to increase patrols in this area, especially during the late night hours when the hospital shift changes," Officer Rodriguez said. "And we're going to check the security cameras from David's building and any other businesses around here to see if we can get a better look at these guys." David pulled his radio off his shoulder. "I can call my supervisor right now and get you access to our footage. We have cameras covering the parking lots and the street in front of our building." "That would be great," Officer Chen said. "The more evidence we can gather, the better chance we have of catching these guys before they hurt someone." While David made the call to his supervisor, Officer Rodriguez turned back to Lisa. "Do you have a safe way to get home tonight? We can give you a ride, or is there someone you can call?" Lisa thought about it. Her roommate Jenny was asleep, but she would definitely wake up to come get her if she called. "I can call my roommate. She has a car." Good, don't walk home alone, especially not tonight. These guys might still be in the area, and they might be angry that their plan didn't work. The thought of those two men being angry about what happened made Lisa feel sick. She hadn't done anything wrong except try to walk home from work, but now she was involved in something dangerous that she didn't understand. David finished his call and turned back to the officers. My supervisor is on his way. He'll be here in about 10 minutes with the keys to the security office. You can review all the footage from tonight. Perfect, Officer Rodriguez said. She handed Lisa a business card. This has my direct number on it. If you see those two men again, or if you notice anyone following you, call me immediately. Don't wait and don't try to handle it yourself. Officer Chen looked around the diner, which was still warm and bright and full of normal people doing normal things. You should probably stay here until your roommate picks you up. And from now on, maybe arrange for rides when you work the night shift. Lisa nodded, though the thought of having to change her whole routine because of two dangerous strangers made her angry. She had worked hard to become independent, to build a life where she could take care of herself. Now these men had taken some of that independence away from her without even touching her. We're going to patrol the area now, Officer Rodriguez said, standing up. David, thanks for doing the right thing tonight. Lisa, stay safe. As the officers left the diner, Lisa realized that even though she was safe now, this wasn't over. Those two men were still out there somewhere, probably looking for their next victim. Jenny arrived at the diner 20 minutes later, still in her pajamas with a coat thrown over them and her hair in a messy bun. She rushed through the door looking panicked and immediately spotted Lisa sitting in the booth with David. "Oh my God, are you okay?" Jenny asked, sliding into the booth next to her roommate. "Your phone call scared me to death. I got here as fast as I could." Lisa hugged her friend, feeling grateful for the first time all night. "I'm fine now. This is David. He basically saved my life tonight." David smiled and shook Jenny's hand. "I just happened to be in the right place at the right time." "He's being modest," Lisa said. "Two men were following me from the hospital and David saw it happening and came to help me." Jenny's eyes went wide. "Following you? Like actually stalking you?" "The police think they're the same guys who attacked 3 other women this month," Lisa explained. "David saw them start following me when I left work and he followed all of us to make sure I stayed safe." "You're a hero," Jenny said to David. "Seriously, thank you for protecting my friend." David looked uncomfortable with the praise. "Anyone would have done the same thing." "No, they wouldn't have," Lisa said firmly. "Most people would have minded their own business or just called the police and hoped for the best. You actually put yourself at risk to help a complete stranger." They sat in the diner for another hour, talking and drinking coffee while they waited for the police to finish checking the area. David told them more about his job and how his sister's attack had made him more aware of these kinds of situations. Jenny shared stories about her own experiences walking alone at night and how she always felt nervous but had never actually been followed like this. When Officer Rodriguez finally came back to the diner, she had good news. "We found them," she announced as she approached their table. "2 men matching your descriptions were picked up about 6 blocks from here. They were trying to break into a car when one of our patrol units spotted them." Lisa felt a huge weight lift off her shoulders. "They're in jail?" "They're in custody," Officer Rodriguez confirmed. "And David's security footage was incredibly helpful. We got clear shots of both their faces as they followed you past his building. Combined with the attempted car break-in, we have enough to hold them while we investigate their connection to the other attacks." David looked relieved too. "So Lisa doesn't have to worry about them coming after her?" "Not these two," the officer said. "Though I'd still recommend being extra careful for a while. And Lisa, we'll probably need you to come in sometime this week to look at a lineup and give a formal statement." Lisa nodded. The thought of having to face those men again, even in a police station, made her nervous. But she knew it was important to help make sure they couldn't hurt anyone else. Over the next few days, the story got even better. The 2 men confessed to all 4 attacks after being confronted with the security footage and witness statements. They had been targeting women leaving the hospital specifically because they knew the night shift workers would be tired, alone, and carrying purses with their paychecks or credit cards. Lisa had to take 2 days off work to deal with the police paperwork and court proceedings, but her supervisor was incredibly understanding. In fact, the hospital decided to start offering free shuttle service for night shift employees who didn't have cars, so no one would have to walk home alone again. But the most unexpected part of the whole experience was what happened with David. 3 days after that terrifying night, he showed up at the hospital during her lunch break with a coffee and a sandwich from the deli down the street. "I wanted to check on you," he said when she met him in the lobby. "Make sure you were doing okay after everything." They sat together in the hospital cafeteria, and Lisa found herself really enjoying his company. David was funny and thoughtful, and he had this way of listening that made her feel like he was genuinely interested in what she had to say. He told her more about his job and his family, and she shared stories about her work as a nurse and why she had chosen that career. "I keep thinking about that night," Lisa admitted as they finished eating. "Not the scary parts, but how you just stepped in to help without even knowing me. That says something about who you are as a person." David smiled. "My mom always taught me to look out for other people. She said you never know when you might be the only thing standing between someone and something terrible. Your mom sounds like a smart woman." "She is. You'd like her." That comment hung in the air for a moment, and Lisa realized that David was thinking about introducing her to his family. The idea should have seemed crazy after only knowing him for a few days, but somehow it didn't. Over the next few weeks, David started stopping by the hospital regularly. Sometimes he brought coffee. Sometimes he just wanted to walk with her to her car after her shift. Lisa found herself looking forward to seeing him, and not just because he made her feel safer. Jenny noticed the change in her roommate immediately. "You're different," she said one evening as they made dinner together. "Happier. It's like that awful night turned into something good." Lisa thought about it as she chopped vegetables for their salad. "I think it did. Not the part where I was in danger, obviously, but meeting David, seeing that there are still people in the world who will risk themselves to help strangers. It restored my faith in humanity a little bit." "And he's cute," Jenny added with a grin. "And he's cute," Lisa agreed, laughing. 6 months later, Lisa and David were officially dating. He had gotten a promotion at work and was now the head of security for 3 different office buildings. Lisa had gotten her car fixed and was working the day shift again, but she still saw David regularly because he had started volunteering at the hospital during his free time. The 2 men who had stalked her were sentenced to 5 years in prison. The judge said their pattern of targeting vulnerable women showed they were a danger to the community. Lisa testified at their sentencing hearing, and even though it was scary to face them again, she felt proud that her courage helped put them away. On the anniversary of that frightening night, David took Lisa back to the diner where they had waited for the police. They sat in the same booth and ordered coffee and pie, talking about how much their lives had changed in just 1 year. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't been working that night?" Lisa asked. David reached across the table and took her hand. "I try not to think about that," he said. "I'm just grateful that I was exactly where I needed to be." Lisa squeezed his hand back. "Me too. Sometimes the worst nights of your life turn out to be the beginning of the best parts." Lisa learned that courage comes in many forms, and sometimes the person who saves you ends up being the person you've been waiting for all along.